Hey there, you fiendish rogues, and welcome to Barenaked Reviews. I'm Rishi B, and I'm reviewing Rogue One, a Star Wars story, till it's bare naked. Well, kind of. This is a quick spoiler-free review for opening weekend. A more in-depth Star Wars discussion is pending. I mean, anyone with a podcast is a dork, and all dorks have to dork out for Star Wars, right? I think I'm legally obligated to. Actually, I was looking at the iTunes podcast legalese, and I think I saw that in there. Before we get into it, I wanted to let you know that you can be a guest of honor for the show and pick a topic for a future episode by giving feedback via email to barenakedreviews@gmail.com or liking, sharing posts from the Facebook page or the YouTube account, sending tweets to @barenakedrevs. And a reminder that all episodes of Barenaked Reviews at this point can be found on rishib.com. I got episodes like reviews of Arrival starring Amy Adams, a comedy competition between South Park, Family Guy, and Simpsons, and reviews of Man in the High Castle Season 1. All right, let's do it. This is a synopsis. Rogue One, a Star Wars story, opens up with a guy who was once involved with developing weapons for the Empire. The Empire then attempts to kill his family to get him to come back to the Empire. However, they fail to kill his young daughter, Jyn Erso, played by Felicity Jones. She is raised by Saw Gerrera, played by Forrest Whitaker, who, although he sympathizes with the rebels, he's mainly focused on his own gain. After becoming a young adult, Jyn separates and loses track of Saw, and she ends up getting imprisoned by the Empire. The rebels, including Cassian Andor and K2SO, respectively played by Diego Luna and Alan Tudyk, cut a deal with Jyn that in exchange for her freedom, she helped them steal data from the Empire that will help the rebels in their resistance. Along the way, she runs into many characters varying in levels of criminality, including Chirrut Imwe, played by the Ip Man himself, Donnie Yen. Alright, so I'm recording this on Friday of Rogue One opening weekend, and already Rogue One is on its way to an all-time record for opening weekend box office. Currently at this time it has 29 million, and that's just before opening, so that's the biggest pre-opening for 2016, and it's 7th of all time. So for those of you who are not in the know, Rogue One, a Star Wars story, it's not part of a regular trilogy. So Star Wars, there's the original trilogy starting with A New Hope, so that's 4, 5, 6. Then there's the prequels that were in the 2000s. So this is taking place between Star Wars 3 and Star Wars 4. This is a standalone film. So Star Wars has Felicity Jones, whom you might know as Stephen Hawking's wife from that one movie. It also has Alan Tudyk, who's my man Wheeler from Firefly, voicing the droid, K2SO. We got Diego Luna here, who's best known for being in Milk and Elysium. It's also got my man Forrest Whitaker, who's best known for being awesome and stuff. And it's got Mads Mikkelsen. It feels like he's just in about everything these days. He was in Doctor Strange. He was the bad guy there. Probably best known for losing the poker game with Daniel Craig, James Bond. Directed by Gareth Edwards. Best known for Godzilla. And he was nominated for a Primetime Emmy for his work on the series Perfect Disaster. Rogue One hits you up pretty quick with the things that you're looking for. You're looking for some charming side characters. You get that with the droid of the movie. It's K2SO. And Ip Man is in this movie for all my action movie fans. Donnie Yen is in this movie. He plays a character, Chirrut Imwe. Oh man, I mean this is just like in my opinion, this is the best of the charming side characters. You start falling in love with all these random characters that are all made up for this movie. As I mentioned, Rogue One fits in between Star Wars 3, Revenge of the Sith, and Star Wars 4, A New Hope. The people behind the movie were very open about what this movie is doing. This is setting up the events that took place during Star Wars A New Hope, Star Wars 4. And so maybe you could say this is Star Wars 3.5, but, and once again, I'm not spoiling anything here, but the events of this movie are taking place. By the time it ends, you're like maybe within a day or like a couple days minimum from the events of Star Wars A New Hope. So I'm calling this Star Wars 3.75. So this is starring Felicity Jones. She's playing Jyn Erso. You know, there's been some buzz about The Force Awakens and then this movie, Rogue One, having the main character being a woman. And I don't know. I just think it's okay. I don't really see it as a thing. So if you do and you're expecting something here about bashing on Hollywood trying to push women where they don't belong, any person would have been fine, of any gender, of any color. And Felicity Jones happened to be that. And she did really well. I thought the action in Rogue One was really great. It kind of starts off with some story. You don't get too much action getting into the beginning and the middle, but then all of a sudden towards the end, you start careening all towards that. But then it just leans all into action towards the end. I was actually okay with that. I think I got enough story.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's Cast and Crew Honorable Mention!
And the honorable mention for Rogue One for this episode is Greg Fraser, who is the cinematographer. So once again, not spoiling anything from the movie, but there are a few very awesome Darth Vader scenes. So you knew you were going to get some of the old characters. I'm going to get into fan service a little later, but because you knew that this was the events leading up to Star Wars 4 A New Hope, you had to expect that some of the C-3POs, R2-D2s, Darth Vaders, Chewbacca's, you know, all those guys that we all know and love. We all knew that there was a possibility of that. But Darth Vader comes in, and once again, I'm not going to spoil anything. He is just like so awesome in this movie. And he's barely even in it. He is just made to look so menacing, so awesome. And a lot of that was because the scenes that he was in, it was because of the imagery. That just makes his presence like so awesome. But a lot of that was the lighting and the camera action of those scenes. So I have to attribute all that to Greg Fraser, who's an Australian cinematographer, and he's best known for Zero Dark 30. He's probably best known for that. He also worked on... So I was reading up about Greg Fraser, and some of my reading you can find in the show notes. Posting an article there where he talked about some of the work that he did for this. And a lot of the cinematography was because of these RGB LED lights that he found, which allowed him to have great control over the range and quality of color while filming. And some of the equipment that he used for Rogue One was also used to make the movie Revenant, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, and Quentin Tarantino's Hateful Eight movie. So he used a lot of that same equipment for Rogue One, and I think it definitely makes a difference. In particular, some of the sweeping scenes in Rogue One, but also during the action scenes. And they're cramming a lot of different ships, battleships, and all this kind of stuff in space, and it just looks so great. So I want to address the fan service. That's something that comes up and is going to come up with every Star Wars movie. Amongst the Star Wars nerds, I mean, there's The Force Awakens that came out last year in 2015, made by J.J. Abrams, and that was the big reboot for Star Wars. So there was a lot of disappointment after The Force Awakens came out and everyone saw it. It did very well in the theaters as a movie. It did like awesomely, and it totally reinvigorated the franchise. But there was some critical reception to The Force Awakens that there wasn't enough new. It was very reiterative, regurgitated. All the re-ited words that was applied to The Force Awakens. Rogue One, it does have some fan service. You know, you have to do two things with the fan service. Either you're throwing it in because you just want to make the fans point at the screen and say, "Ha, I get it," or are you setting something up? So going into this movie, you know that Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, is leading up to the events of Star Wars A New Hope. So you know that some classic Star Wars things are going to be involved just to make sure that the story syncs up. So that should just be part of your expectations going in. But for me personally, I was okay with The Force Awakens, and I'm definitely okay with Rogue One because it's just like such a great movie. I feel like the story was original enough and I got enough original content where the fan service, which was basically all there just to sync up Rogue One with A New Hope, I thought it was necessary. I thought it didn't go over the top with that. And quite honestly, I don't really understand all the quibbling about fan service. I mean, yeah, if it's like too fan service, then it makes the movie bad. But I mean, Star Wars as a franchise is as nerdy as you can get. And, you know, it invented nerds in a way. I mean, so here's how it works in nerdery. The nerds who win at nerdery are the ones who get the most obscure references. So why would you be fighting over fan service? Why would you not want that in your movie or in your stories? Because all these little hidden gems of fan service, when you get that, you get this euphoric, you get this dopamine effect in your brain, like, oh, I get it. And if you're the only one who got that and no one else got that, you win at nerdery. My only major negative that I have with the story, once again, not spoiling anything, but there's a point in the movie, and I definitely felt it. There's some character development, and then it starts leaning into the action. You start getting into classic Star Wars intergalactic fight scenes. Right before that, I felt this moment where there may have been more character development, or are we going to go into the action? The filmmakers decided to go lean in all into the action. While I was watching the movie, I felt that I could have used more character development because outside of the main characters, played by Felicity Jones and Diego Luna, I didn't really feel a good enough reason or motive from the rest of the characters to go into war and basically give their all into this fight. At the time, I was disappointed about that, but now from this end where I've watched the whole movie, I can appreciate leaning into the action because the action was some fan service. It definitely was nostalgic. If you enjoyed the fight scenes from the original trilogy, you're definitely going to love the action scenes in Rogue One. Overall, Star Wars Rogue One, I'm going to give it out of 5 Imperial weapon developers, I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 Imperial weapon developers. And I just was really appreciative of this movie at the time. So the way I was thinking about it is The Force Awakens is a very apt title because at the time it's like you have to reboot the franchise. So the Force is awakening there. Star Wars Rogue One, you can call it Rogue One. The Force is mature and alive. It's an original story. It just feels fresh, in my opinion. Another note from my lovely wife, Banafsa, she thought that this was one of the better Star Wars movies out of the series. She's not super into nerding over all the little bits and details of the franchise and the story, but being a self-contained standalone film, it kind of eased off some of the weight of having to size up Rogue One against for the main movies. You have to size them up as a trilogy, which can be some weight. And then also you have to size them up against social media because all of your opinions and everything that's being produced by Star Wars is being constantly battled and quibbled over online. So this just kind of eased off some of that weight. So I thought that was interesting. So 4 out of 5 Imperial weapon developers for Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. Thank you all very much for listening, and make sure you go watch this movie. I think it's a good movie even if you're not really huge into Star Wars. And Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, you're all bare naked over there. You put your gosh darn clothes back on.